The rice bends in the summer wind. Across the Kanto plain, the stalks move in waves of green and gold, rippling toward a horizon where mountains rise blue and distant against a sky unmarked by cloud. Farmers work the paddies in silence, their movements practiced and unhurried, their bodies bent to a rhythm older than memory. Water flows through irrigation channels carved by their grandfathers. The soil holds the warmth of August. The harvest will come soon, as it always comes, as it has for generations without interruption. It has never failed within living memory. This is Japan in the early 1780s. The Tokugawa shogunate has held power for nearly 200 years. Order has become assumption. The great lords pay their tribute. The roads carry commerce. The cities swell with merchants and artisans and pleasure seekers. Edo, the shogun's capital, is one of the largest cities on earth, a dense lattice of wooden buildings and canals and humanity, all of it fed by the rice that flows from the countryside in an endless stream of taxation and trade. The system works because the rice comes. The rice comes because the seasons turn. The seasons turn because they always have. No one questions this. No one needs to. In the northern domains, in the mountains of Shinano and the valleys of Tohoku, the air carries a different quality in the summer of 1782. The warmth arrives late. The rains persist too long. Farmers plant their seedlings and watch the sky with an unease they cannot articulate. The elders speak of similar years in the past, years when the harvest fell short but life continued. There is no panic, only attention. The human capacity for worry is always tempered by the human capacity for hope. The harvest comes, but it is thin. The yields fall below expectation in the northern provinces. Domain officials make notes. Rice prices rise slightly in the markets of Osaka and Edo. The shogunate takes notice, but does not act. Shortfalls happen. Systems adjust. The granaries hold reserves for precisely such occasions. Summer fades into autumn, and autumn into winter. Snow falls deep in the mountains. The farmers repair their tools and wait for spring. Spring arrives cold. The thaw is delayed. The rivers run high with meltwater that chills the paddies rather than warming them. Farmers plant anyway. The schedule of cultivation cannot be negotiated. But the seedlings struggle. The water is too cold. The sun hides behind clouds that seem reluctant to part. In the higher elevations, frost returns in late May, killing shoots that had only just emerged. Domain lords begin to worry. Correspondence flows between castle towns and Edo. Officials consult records, searching for precedent, looking for guidance in the archives of previous administrations. The Tokugawa system is built on precedent. Every action must have justification in what came before. Innovation is suspect. Tradition is safety. The trouble is that no tradition accounts for what is coming. Mount Asama stands on the border of Shinano and Kozuke provinces, a volcanic peak that has smoldered and grumbled for centuries. The people who live in its shadow know its moods. They have watched the smoke rise from its crater. They have felt the occasional tremor beneath their feet. They call the mountains sacred and dangerous in equal measure, a place where spirits dwell and where human affairs carry little weight. In the spring of 1783, the mountain grows restless. Small eruptions send ash drifting over nearby villages. The tremors intensify. Farmers look up from their fields and see the plume rising, dark against the grey sky. Some evacuate. Others stay, trusting that the mountain will settle, as it has settled before. On the 5th day of the 8th month, Mount Asama explodes. The eruption column rises kilometers into the atmosphere, a pillar of ash and rock and superheated gas that blots out the sun across the Kanto plain. Pyroclastic flows race down the northern slopes, obliterating everything in their path. The village of Kambara disappears in minutes, buried beneath a wall of volcanic debris that kills nearly 500 people before they can flee. The Agatsuma River is dammed by debris, then releases in a catastrophic flood that carries destruction downstream. But the immediate death toll, horrific as it is, represents only a fraction of what the mountain will cost. Ash does not recognize borders. It rose high enough to enter the upper currents of the atmosphere, where winds that never touched the ground carried it far beyond the valleys that could see the fire. In distant provinces, farmers would wake to a sky that seemed dimmed without knowing why. In Edo, the light would take on a strange pallor in the weeks that followed, subtle enough to ignore, unsettling enough to notice. Across the sea, in lands the villagers of Shinano would never imagine, that same haze softened sunsets and cooled summers. The mountain had spoken in a language larger than any domain record could contain. But those who suffered most were not the ones who noticed the color of the sky. They were the ones who noticed the silence in their paddies. Where rice should have grown, the ash spreads. It drifts on the wind, settling over fields across multiple provinces. It coats the leaves of rice plants, blocking the light they need to grow. It falls into irrigation channels, contaminating water. It covers the soil with a layer of sterile gray that will not support cultivation. The eruption continues for days, pumping debris into the atmosphere, dimming the summer sun to a pale and sickly disk that provides neither warmth nor strength. The crops fail, not everywhere, not completely, but across wide swaths of central and northern Japan, the harvest of 1,783 falls catastrophically short. Fields that should have yielded bushels produce handfuls. Granaries that should have filled remain empty. The tax collectors arrive as they always arrive, demanding the tribute that domain lords owe to the shogunate, and they find nothing to collect. Here is where the system begins to fail. Rice still exists. The southern domains have harvested enough. Osaka's storehouses are not empty, but the rice is not where the hunger is. The Tokugawa system was designed for stability, not crisis. Each domain guarded its own reserves, bound by obligation but not by solidarity. The shogunate could request cooperation, but it could not command generosity. Lords facing uncertainty protected what they had. Tribute flowed to Edo as required. Relief did not flow north. No one believed they were choosing who would live and who would die. They believed they were preserving order. The difference, in a famine, is fatal. Requests for relief move through bureaucratic channels. Officials deliberate. Weeks pass. The people in the northern villages do not have weeks. The hunger begins quietly. Families reduce their portions. They stretch what little rice they have with millet, with barley, with anything that can be boiled into a gruel that fills the stomach without nourishing the body. When the grain runs out, they turn to the mountains. They strip bark from trees and pound it into a bitter flour. They dig for roots that their ancestors knew were edible only in times of desperation. They gather grasses and ferns and leaves, anything that might provide sustenance. The taste of famine is not dramatic. It is the flat, metallic blandness of water in which something inedible has been boiled. It is the grit of bark between teeth. It is the hollow ache that never quite becomes sharp pain, only a persistent emptiness that drains strength and thought and will. Children weaken first. The elderly follow. In one village in Tohoku, a mother divides a final bowl of thin gruel between her two children. She tells them she has already eaten. She has not. That night, she pretends to sleep so they will not hear her stomach. In the morning, she cannot stand without steadying herself against the wall. There are no dramatic gestures, no speeches, only small decisions made in silence, repeated in houses across the north. When spring comes again, one of the children survives, the other does not. The sick have no reserves to draw upon. In villages across Tohoku, families watch their members fade. The dying do not cry out. They simply grow quieter, their movements slower, their eyes more distant, until one morning they do not wake. The roads begin to carry refugees. Families abandon villages that can no longer support them, walking south toward the cities, toward the domains that might have food, toward anywhere that is not here. They carry what they can and leave the rest behind. The villages they depart from grow silent, houses standing empty, fields returning to wild growth, the infrastructure of generations dissolving in a matter of seasons. Domain officials document what they see. The records that survive describe communities reduced to skeletons, granaries standing empty, roads lined with the bodies of those who could not complete the journey. The language is bureaucratic, restrained, the prose of administrators accustomed to recording facts without emotion, but the facts themselves carry a weight that no prose style can diminish. The famine does not end quickly. It extends across years, from 1782 through 1788, a slow catastrophe that kills not through violence, but through absence. Estimates vary. Some calculate 200,000 dead, others suggest nearly 1 million. The uncertainty is itself a measure of the chaos. The dying happened in scattered villages, in remote valleys, in places where no one was counting. The shogunate responds, eventually. Relief rice is distributed. Emergency measures are implemented. Some domain lords prove more capable than others, organizing aid, opening their reserves, preventing the worst outcomes within their territories. But the response is uneven, delayed, insufficient to the scale of what is happening. The system was not built for this. The system cannot adapt quickly enough. In Tsugaru domain, in the far north, the Lord Tsugaru Nobuyasu attempts reforms after the worst of the famine. He recognizes that the domain's reliance on rice cultivation has made it vulnerable, that diversification and reserve systems are necessary for survival. His efforts come too late for those already dead, but they represent a recognition that the old assumptions no longer hold. Similar realizations spread through the administrative class. The Tenmei Famine reveals fractures in the Tokugawa order that prosperity had concealed. The rigid hierarchy, the domain autonomy, the tribute systems that extracted wealth from countryside to city. All of these function smoothly when harvests are reliable. When harvests fail, the same structures become obstacles to survival. But understanding does not equal change. The shogunate will persist for another 80 years. The domain system will remain intact. The lessons of Tenmei will be noted, discussed, partially addressed, and then gradually forgotten as prosperity returns and memory fades. The volcano quiets. The ash settles into the soil, where it will eventually enrich future harvests. The sky clears. The seasons resume their normal rhythm. In the cities, life continues. The merchants trade. The samurai administer. The pleasure quarters fill with music and laughter. The famine becomes a chapter in chronicles, a subject for officials to study, a warning that subsequent generations will read without fully absorbing. In the villages that survived, the recovery is measured in generations. Fields are replanted, houses are rebuilt. Children are born who will never know the taste of bark flour, who will hear the stories of the hungry years as something distant and almost mythical. The communities knit themselves back together, slowly, imperfectly, carrying forward the memory of loss, even as they resume the rhythms of ordinary life. But some villages do not recover. Some communities simply end, their populations dead or scattered, their names surviving only in administrative records that no one consults. The houses collapse. The fields return to forest. The paths that once connected them to neighboring settlements grow over with brush and are forgotten. The empire survives. The structures of power remain intact. The rice flows again, in time, from countryside to city, from peasant to lord to shogun. The system proves resilient in the aggregate, capable of absorbing catastrophic loss without fundamental transformation. The dead are not part of the aggregate, they are specific. They had names and faces and families. They lived in particular houses in particular villages. They worked particular fields. They hoped for particular futures. And then the mountain erupted, and the summer turned cold, and the rice did not come, and the relief did not come, and they waited in their weakening bodies for a rescue that arrived too late or not at all. The Kanto plain stretches green beneath a summer sun. The rice bends in the wind. The farmers work in silence, their movements practiced and unhurried. The soil holds warmth. The harvest will come. It has come before, it will come again, until it does not. The mountain stands on the horizon, quiet now, its slopes green with forest, its crater exhaling only the faintest wisp of steam. It does not remember what it did. It does not need to remember. It simply waits, as mountains wait, for the pressure beneath to build again, for the fire to find its path upward, for the sky to darken, and the ash to fall, and the fields to fail. And the people who live in its shadow plant their rice and tend their paddies, and trust in the turning of the seasons, because trust is what allows life to continue, and because the alternative to trust is a fear too vast to carry. The wind moves through the stalks. The water flows through the channels. The sun hangs white and warm above a landscape that holds its history in the soil, in the layers of ash and bone and memory that lie beneath the roots of every growing thing. The empire endures. The villages endure for now,